First of all, I think I'm the only TD here who sat for months and months on the Climate Action Committee in 2019, and we looked at this issue for weeks, literally for weeks, and we had all sorts of experts and all sorts of witnesses and all sorts of data brought into us about the question of carbon tax. And the ones that struck me in particular were the witnesses from Vincent de Paul. And Vincent de Paul came to give us evidence about the level of energy poverty in the country. And such was the level in 2019, before this cost of living hike, that Vincent de Paul were at that point spending an extra €4 million a year in fuel subsidies to people who were already on a fuel subsidy from the state in many cases, but others who weren't on a fuel subsidy from the state. And one of the things that their research showed us was that the level of energy poverty across the country was much greater than the measure, which is who gets to have fuel allowance, shows up in terms of the reality for people out there. But park all that aside. I and my party, my group, have been against the carbon tax from the get-go. Not because we don't take climate seriously. We put some of the most radical bills before this House, including ending the extraction of oil and gas in this country, and including stopping the proliferation of data centres and banning LNGs, which the minister sitting in front of me voted against not so long ago. So we take the question of climate and the crisis of climate very, very seriously. The point about carbon taxes, however, on ordinary people is that they are built on an extremely false premise. And that premise is that by imposing them, you help people to change their behaviour. They move from driving a dirty old diesel car onto a nice bus that passes by their house every half an hour, or they buy an electric vehicle, or indeed they retrofit their home to the tune of 30, 40, 50 grand, because they will spend less on dirty old oil that might heat their home or gas that might heat their home. This is a nonsense. For the vast majority of people, not just in this country but on the planet, for the vast, vast majority, carbon taxes do not help to change their behaviour. Their behaviour is embedded in what people are calling here the twin crisis. The twin crisis of climate and cost of living are linked. They are not separate. And they're linked by the fact that we live on a planet that is propelling the market forward as the only answer to everything. That same market is propelling the climate crisis, and that same market is propelling the inequality and the poverty that people live in. And so to support carbon taxes is to be delusional. It's like sitting on the Titanic as it sinks and moving the deck chairs this way, then moving them that way, but the Titanic keeps sinking. Or you could use a more modern analogy from the movie Don't Look Up. It's like throwing stuff at the comet, which still keeps hurtling towards the Earth to blow it apart. So the crisis is extremely serious in climate, but what's needed is radical measures that tackle the fossil fuel industry. And I'll just finish on giving one example of where I think this is best understood. And that is the two countries that are wheeled out always to say, look at the wonderful job they did on their carbon taxes, Norway and Canada. All the research is wheeled out on both of them. Norway, one of the biggest polluters in terms of fossil fuel, a massive oil and gas industry. Canada, the Alberta Sands. The Alberta Sands, one of the dirtiest forms of producing gas on the planet. They are not good examples of how you deal with climate crisis. How you deal with it is you go after the big polluters, the oil and gas industry, the plastic industries and those who are related to them, not after ordinary people who cannot afford to change their behaviour. Instead of that, you go after the guys at the top, the 1% that are dirtying up the planet, and give the rest of us a break.